Ben would love that. Tomorrow afternoon? Perfect. And Lena? Diane wanted me to mention that she's been researching pediatric neurological recovery. She found some interesting articles about the role of motivation and social connection in healing. We could share them if you're interested. After hanging up, Lena felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the medical possibilities Marcus had mentioned. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't navigating Ben's challenges alone. The Williams family had become allies in ways she hadn't expected, their support extending beyond their daughter's friendship with Ben. Wednesday's park visit revealed new dimensions to Joy's intuitive understanding of Ben's needs. She'd brought a small collection of items from home, a frisbee, a beach ball, and what appeared to be a modified hopscotch course drawn in sidewalk chalk. "These are all games you can play sitting down," she explained to Ben, "but they get more fun if you can stand up sometimes too." The beach ball was large enough that catching it required Ben to stretch and reach in ways that engaged his core muscles. The frisbee, thrown in gentle arcs, encouraged him to twist and turn while maintaining his balance. And the hopscotch course had been designed with squares large enough for wheelchair wheels, but with optional challenges that involved standing for varying lengths of time. "Joy, this is amazing," Lena said, watching Ben successfully complete a modified hopscotch sequence that included 2 separate instances of supported standing. "My mum helped me think of it," Joy said proudly. "She knows about how kids learn things, and she said practicing should feel like playing." Diane approached with her familiar notebook, but today she'd also brought a professional-looking folder. "I hope you don't mind, but I brought some research materials I thought might interest you." The articles were from peer-reviewed journals, focused on neuroplasticity in pediatric spinal cord injury cases. The language was technical, but the implications were encouraging. Children's nervous systems possessed remarkable capacity for adaptation and recovery, particularly when rehabilitation included strong emotional and social components. "The most interesting finding," Diane explained, "is that recovery often accelerates when children are engaged in meaningful social play rather than formal therapy sessions. The brain seems to respond better to activities that feel natural and enjoyable. So Joy's games might actually be more therapeutic than his regular physical therapy," Lena asked. "They're certainly complementary. The motivation factor alone could make a significant difference in his neurological healing." As if to demonstrate the point, Ben successfully stood for nearly 2 minutes while playing catch with Joy, his concentration so complete that he seemed unaware of the physical effort required. When he finally needed to sit down, his face glowed with satisfaction rather than fatigue. Marcus had been observing from their usual bench, grading what appeared to be high school essays. But Lena noticed that his attention kept drifting to their children's play, his expression thoughtful and increasingly warm. "They're good for each other," he said, as Lena joined him during a brief break in the games. "Joy is a miracle worker. I don't know how to thank you for letting her spend time with Ben. Joy is the one getting something out of this too. She's always been drawn to helping others, but Ben is teaching her things about resilience and determination that I never could have shown her." There was something in Marcus's voice, a gentleness, an understanding, that made Lena suddenly aware of him as more than just Joy's father. He was an attractive man, she realized, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor that came from working with adolescents. More than that, he was someone who saw beauty in his daughter's friendship with a disabled child. Someone who understood that healing sometimes came in unexpected packages. "Daddy, look," Joy called out. "Ben stood up for the whole alphabet. I sang the ABCs and he didn't sit down until I was finished." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Marcus responded, but his eyes were on Lena when he added, "Some accomplishments are worth celebrating." As they prepared to leave the park, Ben carefully packed Joy's red ball along with a new gift, a small notebook where Joy had written down instructions for each of their games, complete with stick figure illustrations. "This is so you can practice when I'm not here," she explained seriously, "but you have to promise to show me everything you learn next time we play together." Driving home, Lena found herself thinking about Marcus's comment regarding accomplishments. Worth celebrating. Ben's progress was obvious and measurable, but her own healing was more subtle. For the first time in 18 months, she felt connected to a community that included her son without pitying him, that celebrated his achievements without treating them as tragic victories. The Williams family had given them both something precious, the experience of being seen as whole people rather than medical cases. In Joy's games and Diane's research and Marcus's quiet understanding, Lena had found the support system she hadn't realized she'd been desperately needing. That night, as Ben practiced his alphabet standing exercise with Rosa's enthusiastic assistance, Lena allowed herself to imagine possibilities that extended beyond medical recovery. Perhaps healing wasn't just about Ben's legs learning to work again. Perhaps it was also about learning to trust in unexpected friendships, in the kindness of strangers who became family, and in the radical idea that their story might still be unfolding in beautiful, unpredictable ways. The test results arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by Dr. Reynolds' nurse with the kind of professional neutrality that could mean either devastating news or cautious optimism. Lena stared at the sealed envelope for 20 minutes before finding the courage to open it. Ben beside her at the kitchen table, both of them holding their breath. The MRI images showed something unprecedented: new neural pathway development in areas that had been dormant since the accident. The nerve conduction studies revealed electrical activity in pathways that Dr. Reynolds had previously declared permanently damaged. In medical terms, Ben was experiencing what the report cautiously labeled atypical neurological recovery, consistent with pediatric neuroplasticity. "What does that mean in regular words?" Ben asked, studying the complex medical language with the determined expression he brought to difficult homework problems. "It means your spinal cord is healing itself," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means the doctors were wrong about your recovery being impossible. It means Joy was right about yet." That evening, Rosa arrived carrying Ben's old soccer cleats, the ones he'd worn to practice 3 times a week before the accident. She'd found them in the back of his closet while helping Lena organize his outgrown clothes for donation. "I think it's time," Rosa said simply, placing the small blue and white cleats on the kitchen table beside the medical reports. Ben reached for them with reverent hands, running his fingers over the familiar scuff marks and grass stains that told the story of countless practices and games. "They probably don't fit anymore." "Only one way to find out, mijo." The cleats were snug but manageable. Ben's feet had grown during his recovery, but not as much as they might have if he'd been running and playing regularly. More importantly, the act of putting them on seemed to awaken something in his posture, a muscle memory of athletic confidence that had been dormant for months. "Mom, can we call Joy? I want to show her." The Williams family arrived within an hour. Joy, bursting through the apartment door with her characteristic enthusiasm, while Marcus and Diane followed with the patient smiles of parents accustomed to their daughter's impulsive social arrangements. "You're wearing soccer shoes!" Joy exclaimed, immediately dropping to the floor to examine Ben's cleats with the attention of a professional equipment inspector. "Does this mean you want to try playing soccer?" "I don't know if I can run yet," Ben said carefully, "but Dr. Reynolds said my spinal cord is growing new connections, so maybe someday I could try." "Someday is another word like yet," Joy observed sagely. "It means the good stuff is coming, just not quite right now." Marcus had been studying the medical reports with the careful attention of someone who understood the significance of what they represented. This is remarkable, Lena. I've never seen documentation of this level of recovery in spinal cord injury cases. Neither have the doctors, she admitted. Dr. Reynolds wants to present Ben's case at a medical conference. He says it could help other families understand that recovery is possible, even when it seems impossible. Are you comfortable with that kind of attention? The question touched on something Lena had been struggling with since receiving the test results. Ben's recovery was becoming a medical curiosity, a case study that could benefit other children, but might also expose their family to scrutiny they weren't prepared for. I want to help other families, she said slowly, but I also want to protect Ben's privacy and let him be a normal kid. Whatever normal means, Diane added with a gentle smile. Joy has been arguing with her teacher about the definition of normal. Apparently, she's convinced that everyone has something that makes them different, so normal is just another word for boring. Joy had coaxed Ben into attempting to stand while wearing his soccer cleats, her hands providing steady support as he found his balance on the slightly elevated soles. The additional height seemed to help his proprioception, his body's sense of its position in space, and he managed to maintain his standing position for over 3 minutes. These feel good, Ben announced, shifting his weight from foot to foot with increasing confidence. Like my feet remember what they're supposed to do. Want to try taking a step? Joy asked. Just one to see how the soccer shoes feel when they move. What followed was Ben's longest walk since the accident. 8 careful steps across the living room, his hands gripping Joy's for balance, but his legs providing genuine propulsion. When he reached the couch and settled down, both children were breathless with excitement. Ben, you walked across the whole room, Joy exclaimed. That's like practically running. It's not running yet, Ben said, but his grin suggested he was beginning to believe that running might eventually be possible. Marcus approached Lena during the children's celebration, his expression thoughtful. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. How are you holding up? I know Ben's recovery is wonderful, but this level of change must be overwhelming for you too. The question caught Lena off guard. For months, every conversation had focused on Ben's needs, Ben's progress, Ben's future. She'd become so accustomed to defining herself as his caregiver that she'd almost forgotten she was also a person with her own emotional needs. I'm terrified, she admitted. For 18 months, I knew what to expect. Bad days and good days, but within predictable parameters. Now everything is uncertain again. What if his progress stops? What if it reverses? What if I make the wrong decisions about his treatment? What if everything works out better than you dared to hope? Marcus asked gently. That's almost scarier. I don't know how to plan for miracles. Maybe you don't plan for them. Maybe you just say thank you and take it one day at a time. Their conversation was interrupted by Joy's announcement that she had a new game idea, one that involved both children wearing soccer cleats and practicing kicking a soft foam ball while sitting on the floor. Kicking uses different leg muscles than walking, she explained, with the authority of someone who had clearly given the matter serious thought. So we should practice lots of different ways of moving. The foam ball was perfect for indoor play, large enough to be safe, but soft enough to prevent damage to furniture or fragile objects. More importantly, it was designed to respond to gentle touches, making successful kicks achievable for someone with limited leg strength. Ben's first attempts were tentative, small movements that barely connected with the ball, but Joy's enthusiastic coaching and her own demonstrations of various kicking techniques gradually built his confidence. Within 30 minutes, he was successfully directing the ball across the room with deliberate, controlled movements. This is amazing, Diane said, making notes in her ever-present notebook. The progression from standing to walking to controlled leg movements. It's like watching 18 months of traditional physical therapy compressed into 2 weeks. Joy is the best therapist he's ever had, Lena said, watching her son's face. glow with pride as he executed a particularly good kick. "She's not just a therapist," Marcus observed. "She's a friend who happens to bring out the best in him. That's probably why it's working so well." As the evening wound down, Joy carefully packed the foam ball into her backpack alongside her red bouncy ball and other therapeutic toys that had evolved into their regular play equipment. "Ben, I have an idea," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor beside his chair. "What if we practice soccer together every day for a whole week? Not here, but at the park where there's more room. And maybe your mom and my parents could watch, and we could show them how good you're getting at kicking and walking." "Like a demonstration?" Ben asked, intrigued by the idea. "Like a party, a celebration party for your legs getting better." "Would that be okay, Mom?" Ben's voice carried a note of longing that made Lena's heart ache with love and pride. "I think that sounds wonderful. And maybe," Joy continued, her voice taking on the conspiratorial tone that marked her best ideas, "maybe we could invite other kids too. Kids who might want to learn that wheelchairs and walking can both be fun." Marcus and Lena exchanged glances over the children's heads, both recognizing the profound wisdom hidden in Joy's simple suggestion. She was proposing something that went beyond Ben's individual recovery. She was envisioning a community celebration of difference, an event that would normalize disability while celebrating ability. "That's a beautiful idea, Joy," Marcus said. "We'd need to plan carefully and make sure Ben feels comfortable with that much attention." "I think I'd like it," Ben said thoughtfully, "if Joy was there with me, and if we could show people that being different doesn't mean being sad." As the Williams family prepared to leave, Lena found herself walking Marcus to the door while Joy and Ben made final plans for their week of soccer practice. "Thank you," she said simply, "for all of this. I don't know how to express what your family has given us." "You don't need to thank us," Marcus replied. "Joy has learned as much from Ben as he's learned from her, maybe more. Still, I want you to know that this friendship, what you've allowed to develop between them, it's changed everything for us." Marcus paused at the door, his expression serious but warm. "Lena, can I say something that might be overstepping?" She nodded. "You're an extraordinary mother. What you've done for Ben, the way you've advocated for him and supported him through this recovery, it's remarkable. But you're also a person who deserves happiness and support and friendship. I hope you know that." The words settled into a place in her heart that had been empty for longer than she cared to admit. "Thank you," she whispered. "See you tomorrow at the park." "We'll be there." After they left, Lena helped Ben through his bedtime routine, both of them still energized by the day's revelations and possibilities. His soccer cleats sat by his bed like a promise of adventures to come, while Joy's foam ball occupied a place of honor on his nightstand. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of me?" Ben asked as she tucked him in, the question coming from the place of deep emotion that sometimes surfaced at bedtime. Lena's throat tightened. Ben rarely mentioned his father, who had left when Ben was 3 years old, unable to handle the responsibilities of parenthood. She'd worked hard to shield Ben from the pain of that abandonment, but moments like this reminded her that children carry questions in their hearts long before they're ready to voice them. "Yes, mijo. I think he would be very proud of how brave you've been, and how hard you've worked, and how kind you are to everyone around you." "Good. Because I want to make people proud. Not just because I can walk again, but because of who I am inside." "You already do that, Ben, every single day." As she turned off his light, Lena reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred in their lives over the past few weeks. Ben was healing, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He was remembering how to hope, how to set goals, how to see himself as someone with unlimited potential rather than permanent limitations. But perhaps more surprisingly, she was healing too. In Marcus's gentle questions and Diane's supportive research and Joy's innocent wisdom, She'd found reminders of who she was beyond Ben's medical needs. She was a woman capable of friendship, deserving of support, worthy of happiness that didn't depend entirely on her son's recovery. The soccer. Cleats waited by Ben's bed like a symbol of dreams, deferred but not abandoned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new possibilities, new opportunities to discover just how much healing was possible when love, hope, and community combined in mysterious, beautiful ways. The week of soccer practice at Riverside Park had been magical. 7 consecutive afternoons of Ben's steady improvement, Joy's patient coaching, and the growing warmth between their families. By Friday, Ben could walk nearly 20 yards with minimal support and had developed a surprisingly accurate kick that could send Joy's foam ball rolling across the grass with purposeful direction. They were planning Saturday's celebration gathering. When it happened, Joy had been demonstrating a new kicking technique, her pigtails bouncing with enthusiasm as she ran in circles around the ball, when she suddenly stopped mid-motion and sat down hard on the grass. "I'm just tired," she said when Ben asked if she was okay, but her breathing seemed labored, and her usually rosy cheeks had taken on a pale, grayish tinge. Diane was beside her daughter instantly, maternal instinct overriding the casual park supervision she'd maintained all week. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Joy insisted. But even Ben could see that something had shifted in her energy, her movements becoming careful and deliberate in a way that was completely unlike her normal, exuberant motion. "Joy, let's sit in the shade for a minute," Marcus said, lifting his daughter with gentle hands and carrying her toward the bench where they usually observed the children's games. Lena followed, her nursing training automatically cataloguing symptoms: rapid, shallow breathing, skin pallor, fatigue disproportionate to activity level, possible dizziness based on how Joy was holding her head. The pattern was concerning, suggesting cardiovascular stress that shouldn't occur in a healthy 6-year-old after moderate play. "Has she been feeling tired lately?" Lena asked quietly, settling beside Diane as Marcus held Joy on his lap. "She mentioned being sleepy this week, but she's been so excited about spending time with Ben that we thought it was just emotional exhaustion from all the socializing," Diane admitted, her voice tight with worry. Joy's breathing gradually returned to normal, but she remained unusually quiet, leaning against her father with uncharacteristic stillness. When Ben wheeled his chair closer to check on her, she managed a small smile, but it lacked her typical radiant energy. "Maybe we should take you to see Dr. Patterson," Marcus said gently, referring to their family physician. "I don't want to miss tomorrow's soccer party," Joy protested weakly. "The party can wait, Mija," Lena said, borrowing Rosa's endearment and earning a grateful look from Diane. "The most important thing is making sure you're feeling better." What followed was a series of medical visits that grew increasingly urgent as Joy's symptoms persisted and intensified. Dr. Patterson referred them to a pediatric cardiologist who ordered immediate tests that revealed what no parent wants to hear. Joy had been living with a serious congenital heart defect that had somehow gone undetected during routine childhood checkups. The diagnosis was complex, a condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome that had been partially corrected by her body's natural adaptations but was now progressing to a point where surgical intervention would be necessary. More devastating was the cardiologist's assessment of her long-term prognosis. Even with surgery, Joy's life expectancy was significantly shortened. Lena found Marcus and Diane in the hospital cafeteria 3 days later, both looking as if they'd aged years in the span of a week. Marcus was staring at an untouched cup of coffee, while Diane held a medical research journal open to an article about pediatric heart surgery outcomes. "How are you holding up?" Lena asked, settling beside them. With her own coffee, a peace offering in the form of shared caffeine and quiet companionship. "We're trying to understand how we miss this," Diane said, her voice hollow with guilt and exhaustion. "Joy has always been so active, so energetic. We thought her ability to connect with other children was just her personality, but now the doctors are saying that children with her condition sometimes develop heightened empathy as a psychological adaptation to their physical limitations." "What do you mean?" Marcus looked up from his coffee, his eyes red with fatigue and unshed tears. "Apparently, kids who are living with serious medical conditions sometimes become more attuned to others who are struggling. Their own experience with vulnerability makes them sensitive to it in other people." The implication hit Lena like a physical blow. Joy's extraordinary gift for connecting with Ben, her intuitive understanding of his needs, her natural therapeutic instincts, all of it might have been rooted in her own experience of living with a serious medical condition. "So she knew," Lena said quietly. "On some level, she knew what it was like to have a body that didn't work the way it was supposed to. We think so, and now we understand why she was so determined to help Ben walk again. She was fighting for both of them." The next piece of information came from Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric cardiologist who had taken over Joy's care. Lena had accompanied the Williams family to the consultation, her nursing background making her a valuable advocate and interpreter during complex medical discussions. "Joy's condition is quite rare," Dr. Chen explained, spreading MRI images and test results across her desk with professional precision. "Most children with this severity of heart defect wouldn't have survived to age 6 without surgical intervention. The fact that Joy has lived a normal, active life suggests remarkable cardiac compensation and unusual physiological resilience." "What does that mean for her future?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. "With surgery, we can improve her quality of life and potentially extend her life expectancy. Without surgery, her heart will continue to decline, and we'd be looking at a timeline of months rather than years." Diane gripped Marcus's hand so tightly that her knuckles went white. "And with surgery. It's difficult to predict. Joy's case is unusual in several ways. Her heart has developed compensatory mechanisms that are quite remarkable, but those same mechanisms make surgical planning more complex. We'd be looking at multiple procedures over several years, with significant recovery periods between each surgery." "How significant?" Lena asked, her professional experience helping her ask the questions that parents might be too overwhelmed to voice. 6 to 8 months of limited activity after each procedure. No running, no playing sports, very careful monitoring of her energy levels and physical exertion. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Joy, who lived for physical play and social connection, would face months of forced inactivity and medical restrictions. Ben, who had just begun to experience the joy of movement again, would lose his most important therapeutic companion during a crucial phase of his recovery. "There's something else," Dr. Chen continued gently. "Children with Joy's condition often develop what we call healing empathy, an unusually strong drive to help others who are experiencing physical challenges. It's a psychological adaptation that helps them process their own medical situation by focusing on helping others." "So her friendship with Ben," Marcus began, "was probably as therapeutic for her as it was for him. Helping Ben walk again gave Joy a sense of agency and purpose that many children with serious medical conditions struggle to find." That evening, Lena sat with Ben in his hospital room where Joy was sleeping, her small form dwarfed by medical equipment and monitors. Ben had insisted on visiting every day, bringing drawings and small gifts, and his unwavering faith that Joy would get better. "Mom, is Joy going to die?" Ben asked quietly, his voice carrying a maturity that no 7-year-old should need to possess. Lena chose her words carefully, Joy is very sick, Mijo. Her heart doesn't work the way it should, and she's going to need surgery to help fix it. Like how I needed doctors to help my back. Similar but more complicated. Joy's surgery will be harder, and it will take longer for her to get better. Ben was quiet for a long moment, studying Joy's peaceful face with the intensity he brought to difficult problems. She helped me when I couldn't walk. Now I want to help her when she can't play. How do you want to help her? I want to get so good at walking that when she's ready to play again, I can teach her new games. Games that don't make her heart work too hard. The simplicity and generosity of his response brought tears to Lena's eyes. In all their conversations about Joy's condition, the adults had focused on loss and limitation. Ben, with the wisdom that sometimes comes from experiencing his own medical challenges, was already thinking about adaptation and possibility. That's a beautiful way to help her, Ben. And Mom, I think Joy knew she was sick. I think that's why she was so good at helping me. She understood about having a body that's different. As they sat in the quiet hospital room, surrounded by the soft beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of medical activity, Lena realized that their story had taken a turn she never could have anticipated. The miracle of Ben's recovery was now intertwined with the tragedy of Joy's diagnosis, two children's medical journeys converging in ways that would test everything they'd learned about hope, healing, and the unpredictable nature of love. But, perhaps, she thought, watching Ben gently place his hand on Joy's sleeping fingers, the most important lesson was that healing could flow in both directions. Joy had helped Ben remember how to walk, but Ben's recovery had given Joy the gift of witnessing the impossible, the proof that medical pronouncements weren't always final verdicts. Tomorrow would bring surgical consultations and treatment plans, and the careful navigation of hope balanced against realistic expectations. But tonight, in the soft glow of hospital lighting, two families who had found each other through their children's friendship prepared to face whatever came next together. Ted's red bouncy ball sat on Joy's bedside table, a talisman of their shared games and discoveries. Beside it, Ben had placed one of his soccer cleats, a promise that someday, when Joy was ready, they would return to the park where their friendship had begun, where impossible things had already proven possible, where yet had become now, and might become again. The days following Joy's diagnosis blurred together in a haze of medical consultations, second opinions, and the careful choreography of hope balanced against harsh reality. Joy's surgery was scheduled for the following month, which gave everyone time to prepare, but also created a suspended state of anxious anticipation that permeated every interaction. Every parent knows the crushing weight of watching their child suffer, but Lena Martinez carried that burden alone for 18 months. Her 7-year-old son Ben hadn't walked since the accident, despite countless therapy sessions and sleepless nights praying for a miracle. As a pediatric nurse, Lena understood the harsh medical reality: recovery might never come. That September afternoon at Riverside Park was supposed to be simple. Fresh air, maybe a smile from Ben as he watched other children play from his wheelchair. She never expected Joy Williams, a cheerful 6-year-old with bright pigtails, to walk up and ask Ben if he wanted to play. And she certainly never expected what came next. Ben slowly rising from his chair, gripping Joy's small hands, taking his first trembling steps in over a year. Sometimes healing doesn't come from hospitals or medicine. Sometimes it comes from the pure heart of a child who sees possibility where others see limitations. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Lena Martinez's modest 2-bedroom apartment, casting gentle shadows across the medical equipment that had become as familiar as furniture. She moved with practiced efficiency around Ben's adjustable bed, checking his overnight positioning and preparing his morning medications with the methodical precision that 18 months of routine had ingrained in her very being. At 42, Lena possessed the quiet strength that comes from weathering life's unexpected storms. Her dark hair, now streaked with premature silver, was pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn through countless 12-hour shifts at Children's Memorial Hospital. But those days felt like a lifetime ago, before the accident, before everything changed. Ben's medical chart sat on the kitchen counter, thick with specialist reports and therapy notes. Dr. Reynolds had been cautiously optimistic in the beginning, speaking in measured tones about spinal cord injuries and the possibility of partial recovery. The MRI images showed the damage clearly: a compressed vertebrae at L2, nerve pathways disrupted but not completely severed. In medical terms, it meant hope. In practical terms, it meant Ben might never walk again. "Good morning, mijo," Lena whispered, gently touching Ben's shoulder. At 7, he still possessed the soft features of early childhood, but his dark eyes held a gravity that no child should carry. The accident had stolen more than his mobility. It had taken the bright sparkle that once lit up every room he entered. Ben stirred, automatically reaching for the bedrail to pull himself upright, a movement that had become second nature. "Is it therapy day, Mom?" "Not today. It's Saturday, remember? We talked about going to the park." Lena helped him transfer to his wheelchair, a process they'd perfected through countless repetitions. The pediatric wheelchair was state-of-the-art, lightweight titanium with custom cushioning, but it still felt like a prison to both of them. Their apartment reflected their new reality. Ramps had replaced steps, grab bars lined the bathroom walls, and the living room furniture was arranged to accommodate wheelchair navigation. On the refrigerator, beneath Ben's latest physical therapy schedule, hung a photo from before. Ben, in his soccer uniform, grass-stained and grinning, holding a small trophy from his first-place team. Lena's eyes lingered on it every morning, a bittersweet reminder of dreams deferred. "Abuela Rosa is coming for lunch," Lena announced, preparing Ben's breakfast with one hand while organizing his daily medications with the other. Multitasking had become an art form, each movement economical and purposeful. Rosa Martinez arrived precisely at 11, as she had every Saturday for the past 18 months. At 73, Ben's grandmother moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had raised 5 children and weathered 4 decades as a factory seamstress. Her presence filled the small apartment with warmth and the lingering scent of her homemade tortillas. "How's my brave boy today?" Rosa asked, settling into the chair beside Ben's wheelchair. She spoke in the mixture of English and Spanish that had been the soundtrack of Lena's childhood, words that carried the weight of tradition and unconditional love. "I had the dream again, Abuela," Ben said quietly, not meeting her eyes. The dreams had started months ago, vivid memories of running, of feeling his legs beneath him, of the moment before everything changed. Dr. Patterson, the child psychologist, said they were part of the healing process, but Lena wondered if they weren't just another form of torture. Rosa took Ben's hand in her weathered ones. "Dreams can be gifts, mijo. They remind us who we are, not just what we've lost." Lena busied herself in the kitchen, listening to her mother's gentle wisdom while fighting the familiar tightness in her chest. As a pediatric nurse, she'd counseled dozens of families through childhood injuries and disabilities. She knew the statistics, understood the stages of grief, could recite the therapeutic benefits of maintaining hope while accepting reality. But professional knowledge felt useless when it was your own child staring out the window, watching other kids ride bikes and chase each other across the courtyard. The accident replayed in her mind, despite her efforts to push it away. March 15th, a Tuesday afternoon that started like any other. She'd been working a double shift at the hospital while Ben was at after-school care. The call came at 4:17 p.m. She remembered the exact time because she'd been checking her watch, calculating when she could leave to pick him up. Instead, She found herself racing through downtown traffic to Metro General, her hands shaking on the steering wheel as the paramedic's words echoed in her head. 7-year-old male, pedestrian versus vehicle, possible spinal injury. The drunk driver had run the red light at 45 miles per hour. Ben had been crossing with the crossing guard, following all the rules, when the silver sedan appeared as if from nowhere. The impact threw him 15 feet, and in that instant their lives split into 2 distinct chapters, before and after. "Mama, you're burning the eggs." Ben's voice cut through her reverie. Lena quickly removed the pan from the heat, forcing a smile. "Just a little crispy. You know Abuela likes them that way." Rosa's knowing look said she understood exactly where Lena's mind had wandered. They'd had this conversation many times, about guilt, about blame, about the what-ifs that could drive a person to madness. Rosa's response was always the same. "God doesn't give us more than we can handle, Mija. He just gives us different ways to grow strong." After lunch, as Rosa helped Ben with a puzzle at the dining table, Lena stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes and watching the world outside. The apartment complex playground was alive with children's laughter, parents pushing swings and chasing, toddlers across the colorful equipment. She used to be one of those parents, racing Ben to the monkey bars, timing his trips down the slide. Now she was an observer, separated by more than just a window. "The park will be good for both of you." "Today," Rosa said, joining her at the sink. "Fresh air, maybe some new faces." "I don't want him to feel different," Lena admitted. "Every time we go out, I see the way people look at him. The pity, the careful politeness. He's still the same boy, Mama. He still loves soccer and bad jokes and chocolate chip cookies. The wheelchair doesn't define him. No, but hiding from the world won't help him either." Rosa's voice carried the authority of experience. "That boy needs to remember how to be a child, not just a patient." Lena nodded, though anxiety still gnawed at her stomach. Public outings had become exercises in logistics and emotional preparation. Would the park be accessible? Would other children stare? Would Ben retreat into himself when faced with activities he could no longer participate in? The questions multiplied like fractals, each one spawning new worries. As they prepared to leave, Lena packed Ben's emergency supplies with practiced efficiency: extra cushions for pressure relief, his communication device in case frustration overwhelmed his words, snacks to maintain his blood sugar, and the ever-present cell phone programmed. With every important medical contact, the bag was heavier than a typical parent's day pack, weighted with the reality of their new normal. Ben's excitement was tentative, but genuine. He'd chosen his favorite shirt, a blue one with a cartoon dinosaur that roared when you pressed its belly. Small victories, Lena reminded herself. Every smile, every moment of normalcy was worth celebrating. The drive to Riverside Park took 12 minutes through tree-lined neighborhoods where autumn was just beginning to paint the leaves. Ben pressed his face to the window, pointing out dogs and interesting cars with some of his old enthusiasm. These glimpses of his former personality always made Lena's heart soar and break simultaneously. The park was moderately busy for a Saturday afternoon. Families spread across picnic blankets, teenagers playing basketball on the courts, elderly couples walking the paved paths that wound around the small lake. Lena had chosen this park specifically for its accessibility features and the reputation for being welcoming to children with special needs. She parked near the playground and began the familiar process of unloading Ben's wheelchair, checking the brakes, adjusting the footrests. The parents moved with casual ease, lifting children from car seats and sending them running toward the swings. Lena envied their simplicity while simultaneously cherishing the hard-won competence she'd developed in navigating Ben's needs. "Where do you want to go first, Mijo?" she asked, walking beside his chair as he navigated the smooth concrete paths. "The swings," he said without hesitation. They'd discovered that he could transfer to the special adaptive swing with minimal assistance, and the back-and-forth motion seemed to calm something restless in his spirit. As they made their way across the playground, Lena noticed other children pausing in their games to watch. Not with cruelty. Children were generally more accepting than adults, but with curiosity. She'd learned to read these moments, to distinguish between genuine interest and uncomfortable staring. Today felt different somehow, the atmosphere charged, with possibility rather than pity. What happened next would change everything, though in that moment Lena was simply a mother, hoping her son might find a few minutes of joy in the ordinary magic of an afternoon at the park. The adaptive swing creaked gently as Ben settled into its supportive harness, his hands gripping the chains with determined concentration. Lena stood nearby, close enough to help but far enough away to give him independence, a delicate balance she'd learned through months of trial and error. "Higher, Mom?" Ben asked, his voice carrying the first note of genuine excitement she'd heard in weeks. "You tell me when it's just right," Lena replied, giving him a gentle push that sent the swing in a slow, steady arc. For a moment, watching Ben's face lift toward the sky, she could almost forget about everything else. Almost. That's when she noticed the little girl. She appeared at the edge of the playground like something from a children's book, pigtails bouncing. With each confident step, wearing a bright yellow dress that seemed to capture and reflect the afternoon sunlight. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, but she moved with the fearless curiosity that marked certain children as natural leaders, the ones who made friends on the first day of school and turned playground equipment into rocket ships through sheer imagination. The girl's parents sat on a bench about 30 feet away, a well-dressed African-American couple who watched their daughter with the relaxed attention of people confident in their child's social skills. The father wore a casual button-down shirt and khakis, reading what appeared to be a professional journal. The mother, elegant in a simple sundress, was sketching in a small notebook, while keeping one eye on the playground dynamics. Lena had noticed them when they arrived, the father's warm laugh as he helped his daughter out of their car, the mother's gentle correction when the girl ran ahead without looking both ways. They radiated the kind of easy family harmony that Lena remembered from before, when life's biggest challenges were things like negotiating bedtimes and packing healthy lunches. The little girl approached Ben's swing with the direct purposefulness that only children possess. She stopped just outside the swing's arc, tilting her head to study this new situation with frank curiosity rather than the awkward uncertainty most adults displayed around Ben's wheelchair. "Hi," she said simply, as if greeting someone in a wheelchair was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm Joy. What's your name?" Ben's swing slowed as he turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. Social interactions had become complicated since the accident. Children weren't sure how to approach him, and their parents often steered them away with apologetic smiles and whispered explanations about being respectful of differences. "Ben," he answered after a moment, his voice tentative but not unfriendly. "That's a good name," Joy declared, with the authority of someone who had clearly given the matter serious thought. "My daddy says names are important because they're the first gift your parents give you. Do you like swinging?" "Yeah, it's okay." "I love swinging," Joy continued, settling onto the ground beside the swing set, as if this were a conversation she'd been looking forward to all day. "Sometimes I pretend I'm flying to different countries. Yesterday, I went to Egypt and saw the pyramids. Where do you fly to?" Lena watched this exchange with growing fascination. Joy spoke to Ben without the careful tone adults used, the one that unconsciously conveyed pity disguised as kindness. Instead, she addressed him as an equal, another child worthy of friendship and adventure. "I don't really fly anywhere," Ben admitted. "I just swing." Well, that's the problem right there, Joy said matter-of-factly, standing up and brushing grass off her dress. You can't fly if you don't believe you're flying. It's like magic. It only works if you really, really believe it. From the corner of her eye, Lena noticed Joy's parents beginning to pay closer attention to their daughter's conversation. The mother had lowered her sketchbook, and the father had marked his place in the journal. But neither moved to intervene. They seemed content to let Joy navigate this social situation on her own. I used to believe in flying, Ben said quietly, so quietly that Lena had to strain to hear him. Before. Before what? Before I couldn't walk anymore. Joy considered this information with the same serious attention she might give a complex math problem. Oh, she said finally, that's why you have wheels instead of walking. That's actually pretty cool. I bet you can go really fast. Sometimes, Ben allowed, and Lena caught the smallest hint of pride in his voice. Can I try sitting in it sometime? I've always wondered what it would be like to have wheels instead of feet. It's not really fun, Ben said, but his tone had shifted from defensive to explanatory. It's hard to reach things, and you can't go upstairs, and people look at you weird. People look at me weird sometimes too, Joy said philosophically. My daddy says it's because I talk to everyone, even, when I'm not supposed to. But I think people are interesting, don't you? Everyone has different stories. Lena found herself leaning forward, drawn into this remarkable conversation between two children who seemed to exist in a world where differences were simply facts to be acknowledged rather than barriers to be overcome. What's your story? Joy asked Ben, settling back onto the grass with the air of someone preparing for a good tale. Ben looked uncertain, glancing toward Lena as if seeking permission or guidance. She nodded encouragingly, curious to see how he would explain his own experience to this earnest little girl. I got hit by a car, he said simply. It hurt my back, and now my legs don't work right. The doctors thought maybe they would get better, but they haven't yet. Yet, Joy repeated, emphasizing the word. That's a good word. Yet means it might still happen, right? Maybe. My mum says we have to be realistic about expectations. What does that mean? It means I probably won't walk again. Joy frowned, clearly dissatisfied with this conclusion. But you didn't say never. You said probably. That's different. Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. In all the months of therapy sessions and medical consultations, no one had made that distinction quite so clearly. The difference between probably and never, a gap that might hold room for miracles. Do you want to play tag? Joy asked suddenly, jumping to her feet with renewed energy. I can't run, Ben said, stating what seemed like an obvious fact. So, I can't fly, but I pretend I can. Maybe you can pretend you can run. That's not the same thing. Why not? Ben struggled to answer, his face scrunched in concentration. Because flying isn't real, running is real, and I can't do it. But pretending is real too, Joy insisted. When I pretend to fly, I really feel like I'm flying. Maybe if you pretend to run, you'll really feel like you're running. Before Ben could respond, Joy had moved closer to his swing, reaching out her small hands toward his. Here, let me help you down. We can play tag sitting down if we need to. Lena started to intervene. Ben's transfer from the swing to his wheelchair required careful attention to prevent falls or injuries. But something in Joy's matter-of-fact confidence stopped her. The little girl wasn't treating Ben like a medical patient. She was treating him like a playmate who needed a different approach to the same game. I don't know, Ben said uncertainly, but Lena could see the longing in his expression. How long had it been since another child had asked him to play? Really play, not just sit nearby while others ran around him? It's okay, Joy said gently, her hands still extended. I won't let you fall. And then, to Lena's absolute shock, Ben began to shift forward in the swing, his hands reaching toward Joy's small fingers. The medical part of Lena's brain screamed warnings about proper transfer techniques and safety protocols. but something deeper, the part of her that was simply a mother, held her back. Ben's feet touched the ground as he leaned forward, Joy's hands supporting his arms with surprising strength for such a small child. For a moment, they stayed like that, Ben partially standing while gripping Joy's hands for balance. "See," Joy said encouragingly, "you're doing it." Doing what? Standing. That's the first part of walking. Ben looked down at his legs in wonder, as if seeing them for the first time in 18 months. They trembled with the effort of supporting. His weight, muscles that had grown weak from disuse, suddenly called upon to remember their purpose. "I can feel my legs," he whispered, and Lena felt her world shift on its axis. "Try taking a step," Joy urged gently. "Just one. I've got you." What happened next would replay in Lena's memory for the rest of her life, each detail crystal clear and precious. Ben lifted his right foot, actually lifted it, and placed it 6 inches forward. Then his left foot followed, shaky and uncertain, but undeniably moving. One step, then another. 3 steps total before his legs gave out and Joy helped him settle. Onto the ground, both children laughing with delight and surprise. Lena stood frozen, her medical training warring with the evidence of her own eyes. Spinal cord injuries didn't heal spontaneously. Nerve pathways didn't regenerate through force of will. Everything she knew about medicine said that what she'd just witnessed was impossible. But Ben was sitting on the grass, wiggling his toes, inside his sneakers and grinning at Joy with pure, uncomplicated happiness. "Did you see that, Mom?" he called out, his voice carrying a note of triumph that she hadn't heard since before the accident. "I walked. I really walked." Joy's parents had risen from their bench and were approaching cautiously, the mother's sketchbook forgotten in her hands. Their expressions mixed concern with wonder. Clearly they understood that they'd witnessed something extraordinary. "That was amazing, sweetheart," the father said to Joy, but his eyes were on Ben, with a mixture of awe and careful skepticism. He extended a hand toward Lena. "I'm Marcus Williams, and this is my wife Diane. I think our daughter just made a new friend." Lena shook his hand automatically, still processing what she'd seen. "Lena Martinez. And yes, I think she did." "Is he okay?" Diane asked quietly, her teacher's instincts clearly attuned to the complexity of the situation. "We saw the wheelchair, but we didn't want to assume anything. He hasn't walked in 18 months, Lena heard herself saying, the words coming from somewhere outside her conscious control. "Not since his accident. His doctor said—" She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence in light of what had just happened. "But he just walked," Joy pointed out matter-of-factly, as if the medical community's opinions were interesting but irrelevant in the face of demonstrated facts. "Yes," Lena said slowly, "he just walked." The 4 adults stood in a loose circle around the 2 children, who were now engaged in examining an interesting beetle that had wandered into their play area. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked at a passing jogger. Normal sounds of a normal day, except that nothing felt normal anymore. "Would you like Ben to stay and play a little longer?" Marcus asked carefully. Joy seems quite taken with him. Lena looked down at her son, who was animatedly explaining the different parts of the beetle's anatomy to Joy while she listened with rapt attention. His face held more life than she'd seen in months, and his body language had shifted from the careful, protective posture he'd adopted since the accident to something more open and confident. "I think he'd like that very much," she said, settling onto a nearby bench while keeping her eyes fixed on this impossible, wonderful scene. As the children continued their exploration of the grass and everything living within it, Lena found herself thinking about the word Joy had emphasized. Yet. Ben hadn't walked yet, such a small word to carry such enormous implications. In her 18 months of careful medical realism, she'd somehow lost track of the possibility that yet implied. But here, on this ordinary September afternoon, yet had become now, and now was reshaping everything she thought she knew about healing, hope, and the mysterious ways that life sometimes surprises us when we least expect it. That night, sleep eluded Lena completely. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the park in exhaustive detail, the feel of Joy's small hand in Ben's, the look of concentration on his face as he took those impossible steps, the sound of his laughter, genuine, unguarded laughter, for the first time in 18 months. At 3 a.m. she gave up on rest and padded quietly to the kitchen, where Ben's medical chart waited on the counter like a stack of legal documents proclaiming the impossibility of what she'd witnessed. Dr. Reynolds' most recent notes were clinical and definitive. Patient shows no signs of neurological recovery. Recommend focusing therapy goals on adaptation and emotional adjustment rather than motor function restoration. She opened her laptop and began typing search terms into medical databases she'd maintained access to through her nursing credentials. Spontaneous spinal cord recovery, pediatric neurological regeneration, psychological factors in paralysis recovery. The results were sparse and mostly discouraging. Spontaneous recovery from complete spinal cord injury was virtually non-existent. Partial recovery was possible in some cases, but typically occurred within the first 6 months post-injury, not after 18 months of stability. Yet Ben had walked 3 steps, admittedly, and only with support, but his legs had responded to conscious command in a way they hadn't since March 15th. The medical literature had no explanation for what she'd witnessed, which left her in the uncomfortable position of either doubting her own eyes or questioning everything she'd been told about her son's condition. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would call Dr. Reynolds' office first thing Monday and request an emergency consultation. She would document exactly what had happened and push for new tests, new evaluations, new possibilities that might explain this unexpected development. But first, she had to see if it could happen again. Ben woke with an energy she hadn't seen since before the accident, immediately asking when they could return to the park to see Joy. His questions came in a rapid-fire stream. Could they go today? Did Joy live nearby? When could he show Abuela Rosa that he could stand up? The enthusiasm in his voice made her heart soar, even as her practical mind urged caution. "Let's take it slow, mijo," she said, helping him transfer to his wheelchair. "For breakfast. Yesterday was wonderful, but we don't want to push too hard too fast. But Mom, I could feel my legs, really feel them. They were tired after, like when I used to run around the soccer field." He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Do you think the doctors were wrong? Do you think I might get better?" The hope in his voice nearly broke her heart. How did she balance medical realism with the miracle she'd witnessed? How did she protect him from disappointment while nurturing this fragile new possibility? "I think we need to be very careful about expectations," she said carefully. "What happened yesterday was amazing, but we don't know yet what it means for your recovery." "Joy thinks I can walk again," she said, "yet means it might still happen." "Joy is a very special little girl, but she's not a doctor, Ben. Neither were you when you helped me learn to ride my bike," he pointed out, with the logic that only children could wield so effectively. Rosa arrived for Sunday lunch carrying a bag of groceries and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. Ben had called her the night before, his words tumbling over each other as he described his afternoon at the park. Now she studied him with the sharp eyes of someone who had raised 5 children and could detect the subtlest changes in their well-being. "Show me," she said simply, settling into her chair at the dining table. "Abuela, I don't think that's—" Lena began, but Rosa held up a hand. "Show me, mijo. If God has given you a gift, we should see it clearly." Ben looked between his mother and grandmother, seeking permission that Lena found herself reluctant to give. What if he couldn't repeat yesterday's performance? What if it— had been a fluke, a moment of pure adrenaline that couldn't be sustained. The disappointment might crush the fragile hope that had begun to bloom in his eyes, but Rosa's weathered hand was already reaching for Ben's, her faith as unwavering as her love. "It's okay, Lena. Some things can't be explained by medicine alone." With his grandmother's support, Ben transferred from his wheelchair to stand beside his chair. His legs shook with the effort, but they held his weight for nearly 30 seconds before he needed to sit back down. It wasn't the dramatic moment from the park, but it was undeniable progress from a boy who hadn't stood unassisted in 18 months. Rosa crossed herself and whispered a prayer of gratitude, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mijo, you have been blessed. But blessings come with responsibility. You must work hard, be patient, and trust that God's timing is perfect." That afternoon, Lena made the call she'd been dreading. Dr. Reynolds' answering service put her through to his emergency line, where she found herself trying to explain the inexplicable to a man who dealt in medical facts rather than miracles. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand your excitement, but what you're describing is highly unusual," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice carrying the patient tone he used with parents who were struggling to accept their child's diagnosis. "Spinal cord injuries don't heal spontaneously after 18 months of stability. It's more likely that Ben experienced a temporary psychological response to social stimulation." "Dr. Reynolds, I'm a nurse. I know what I saw. His legs responded to conscious command. He took 3 independent steps." "I'm not questioning your observation skills, but there are many factors that could create the appearance of motor function without actual neurological recovery. Residual muscle memory, psychological motivation, even involuntary reflexes can seem like voluntary movement to an untrained observer." The phrase "untrained observer" stung, but Lena pushed past her irritation to focus on getting Ben the evaluation he deserved. "Then let's do new tests. MRI, nerve conduction studies, whatever you think is appropriate. Something has changed, and we need to understand what." Dr. Reynolds sighed, the sound of a man who had delivered disappointing news to too many hopeful parents. "Mrs. Martinez, I can schedule Ben for a follow-up appointment, but I want to manage expectations here. Recovery patterns are well established. In spinal cord injury cases, after 18 months, the likelihood of significant improvement is virtually zero, but not absolutely zero." A pause. "No, not absolutely zero." They scheduled the appointment for Thursday morning, 4 days away. 4 days for Lena to observe, document, and prepare for what might be either vindication or crushing disappointment. But in her heart, she knew what she'd witnessed transcended medical statistics. That evening, as she helped Ben through his bedtime routine, he looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mom, what if the doctors say I can't really walk? What if they say it was just pretending?" Lena chose her words carefully. "Then we'll know that pretending can be pretty powerful medicine, and we'll keep working with your therapists to make you as strong as possible, whatever that looks like." "But you believe it was real, right? You believe I really walked?" She looked at her son, this brave, resilient boy who had endured more challenges in his 7 years than many adults faced in a lifetime. He deserved honesty, even if it came with uncertainty. "Yes, mijo, I believe you really walked. I believe something extraordinary happened yesterday, and I believe we're going to do everything we can to understand what it means for your future." Ben smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Good, because I can still feel it, Mom. I can still feel my legs wanting to move. Joy was right, yet is a very important word." As Lena tucked him into bed, she found herself offering a prayer to whatever force had brought Joy Williams into their lives. Whether medical miracle or simple human kindness, that little girl had given Ben something precious, the belief that impossible things might still be possible. The business, Card for Dr. Reynolds sat on her nightstand, a reminder of Thursday's appointment and the questions that would need answers. But for now, in the quiet darkness of their small apartment, hope was enough. Outside, the September night carried the first hint of autumn's approach, and somewhere across the city, a 6-year-old girl with pigtails was probably dreaming about beetles and new friends and the magic that happens when children believe in yet. Tuesday afternoon found them back at Riverside Park, Ben's excitement palpable as Lena pushed his wheelchair along the familiar concrete paths. She'd spent the morning documenting everything she could remember about Saturday's events, creating a detailed timeline that she hoped would prove useful during Thursday's medical consultation. Joy spotted them before they'd even reached the playground, her yellow sundress bright against the green grass as she ran toward them with arms outstretched like she was embracing the entire world. "Ben, you came back," she called, her voice carrying pure delight. "I was hoping you would. I brought something to show you." Marcus and Diane Williams were settling onto their usual bench, Marcus carrying what appeared to be a stack of student papers, while Diane had traded her sketchbook for a paperback novel. They waved at Lena with the cautious friendliness of adults who weren't sure how to navigate this unusual situation. "What did you bring?" Ben asked, his entire demeanor brighter in Joy's presence. Joy reached into a small backpack and carefully withdrew a red rubber ball, the kind sold in toy stores for a few dollars, but treasured by children as if it were made of gold. "It's my favorite bouncy ball," she announced. "My daddy gave it to me when I was 4, and it can bounce higher than my head if you throw it just right." "That's really high," Ben said, appropriately impressed. "Want to play catch? We can sit on the grass and you don't have to worry about running or anything, just throwing and catching." The simplicity of the suggestion struck Lena as profound. Joy had instinctively found a way to include Ben in normal childhood play, without making his limitations the focus of the activity. It was play therapy without the therapy, inclusion without the self-consciousness that usually accompanied well-meaning adult interventions. Ben transferred to the grass with Lena's assistance, settling cross-legged across from Joy as she demonstrated the ball's impressive bouncing capabilities. Their laughter created a soundtrack of pure childhood joy that drew smiles from other park visitors. "Joy has a gift," Diane said, joining Lena on a nearby bench while keeping one eye on the children's game. She's always been drawn to children who are different, kids who are shy or new to school or facing challenges. "I used to worry she was too trusting, but Marcus says she just sees people's hearts instead of their circumstances." "She certainly saw Ben's heart," Lena replied, watching as Joy patiently helped Ben perfect his catching technique. "It's been so long since he's played with another child, really played. Not just polite interaction while adults hover nearby." "How long since his accident?" 18 months. A drunk driver ran a red light." The words came easier now after countless repetitions to doctors, therapists, insurance representatives, and concerned relatives. But saying them to Diane felt different, like sharing information rather than reciting medical history. "I can't imagine," Diane said softly. "As a teacher, I've worked with children facing all kinds of challenges, but when it's your own child, the fear must be overwhelming." Lena nodded, surprised by how comfortable she felt discussing Ben's situation with this woman she'd only just met. Perhaps it was Diane's professional experience with children, or maybe the natural rapport that sometimes develops between parents who recognize kindred spirits in each other's children. "The hardest part is watching him lose pieces of himself," Lena admitted. "He used to be so social, so confident, the kid who would walk up to anyone and start a conversation. Now he holds back, waiting to see if people will be comfortable around him." "Joy doesn't seem to have that problem," Diane observed with a smile. "No, she doesn't. Saturday was the first time in months that I've seen him forget about his limitations." They watched as Joy demonstrated a new throwing technique, her patient encouragement helping Ben achieve increasingly accurate tosses. The red ball arced between them in gentle parabolas, each successful catch celebrated with shared laughter. "Can I ask you something?" Diane said carefully. Marcus mentioned that Ben stood up on Saturday, that he took a few steps. Lena felt her chest tighten. "Yes, his doctors say it's impossible. His injury type doesn't allow for that kind of recovery after so much time. But I saw it happen." "Sometimes impossible things are just things we don't understand yet," Diane said thoughtfully. "I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've seen children overcome diagnoses that were supposed to define their limitations. Not always, but often enough to make me believe in possibilities that don't fit medical textbooks. His appointment is Thursday. New tests, new evaluations. I'm terrified they'll find nothing has changed, that it was just—" Lena paused, searching for words that wouldn't diminish what she'd witnessed. Just what? Just hope, making us see things that weren't really there. Diane was quiet for a moment, watching Joy demonstrate how to make the ball bounce in zigzag patterns. "Hope is powerful medicine," she said finally. "Even if the physical changes aren't permanent, the emotional changes might be. Look at him." Lena followed Diane's gaze to where Ben was attempting to copy Joy's zigzag throw, his face bright with concentration and determination. His posture was straighter, his movements more confident than they'd been in months. "Mom, watch this," Ben called out, successfully executing a complex bouncing sequence that sent the red ball in a perfect triangle pattern. "Joy taught me how to make it dance." "That's wonderful, mijo," Lena responded, but her attention was caught by something else. The way Ben was shifting his weight, adjusting his sitting position with movements that seemed more fluid, more controlled than she remembered. "I want to show you something else," Joy said, setting the ball aside. "But it's kind of a secret game. You have to promise not to tell other grown-ups because they might worry." Ben nodded eagerly, drawn into the conspiracy of childhood secrets. Joy glanced toward her parents, then leaned closer to Ben. "Sometimes I pretend my legs are too tired to work, and I have to figure out how to play games sitting down. It makes regular games more interesting." "That's not pretending for me," Ben pointed out matter-of-factly. "I know. That's why you're going to be really good at it. You already know all the tricks." Joy's logic was unassailable in the way that only 6-year-old reasoning could be. "Want to try something? It's like what we did on Saturday, but smaller." Before Lena could intervene, Joy had helped Ben shift from his cross-legged position to kneeling, her small hands providing steady support as he found his balance. It wasn't standing, not exactly, but it required core strength and leg control that his doctors insisted he didn't possess. "See? Your legs remember," Joy said with satisfaction. "They were just sleeping, but now they're starting to wake up." Ben remained in the kneeling position for nearly a minute, his face glowing with pride and wonder. When he finally settled back down, he looked at his legs with something approaching amazement. "They feel different," he told Joy, "like they're more there than they were before." Marcus had approached during this exchange, his expression mixing concern with curiosity. "Everything okay over here?" "Daddy, Ben's legs are waking up," Joy announced with the matter-of-fact confidence she brought to all her observations. "They were sleeping after his accident, but now they remember how to work." Marcus looked to Lena for guidance on how to respond to this pronouncement. His professional training as a school counselor had clearly prepared him for many challenging conversations with children, but this situation fell outside normal parameters. "Joy has a very creative way of looking at the world," Lena said carefully. "I don't think it's creative," Ben interjected. "I think it's true. My legs do feel like they're waking up. Like when your foot falls asleep and then gets tingly when the feeling comes back." The 4 adults exchanged glances over the children's heads, each processing this development through their own lens of experience and expertise. Marcus's expression was thoughtful rather than skeptical, while Diane had pulled out a small notebook, not to sketch, but to jot down observations with the systematic attention of an experienced educator. "Would you like to stay for a few more minutes?" Marcus asked. Joy seems quite invested in her new friendship. "Please, Mom," Ben added, his voice carrying a note of pleading that she rarely heard anymore. "Joy was going to teach me how to make the ball bounce in a star pattern." Looking at her son's eager face, Lena found herself nodding before her cautious mind could raise objections. "A few more minutes," she agreed. As the children returned to their ball games with renewed enthusiasm, the adults settled into a comfortable observation distance. Lena found herself studying Joy with professional curiosity, trying to understand what made this particular child so naturally gifted at connecting with Ben. Joy's approach was uniquely direct. She acknowledged Ben's limitations without dwelling on them, found creative solutions to inclusion challenges, and most importantly, she treated his wheelchair and physical therapy needs as interesting logistics rather than tragic circumstances. She was, Lena realized, the first person besides family members who had seen Ben as a complete person, rather than a collection of medical challenges. "Diane mentioned you're a nurse," Marcus said, settling onto the bench beside her. "Pediatric?" "Yes, at Children's Memorial. Or I was, before Ben's accident. I took extended leave to manage his care, and I'm not sure when I'll be ready to go back." The admission surprised her. She hadn't voiced that uncertainty to anyone, not even Rosa. "That must be incredibly difficult, using your professional skills to advocate for your own child, but also having the medical knowledge to understand all the challenges he faces." "Sometimes I think ignorance would be bliss," Lena said honestly. "When other parents ask about recovery, timelines and treatment options, I can give them statistics and medical explanations. But statistics feel different when it's your own child." "Joy asked us about Ben's situation after Saturday," Marcus said. "We tried to explain about spinal cord injuries in terms a 6-year-old could understand, but she was more interested in unpractical questions, like whether his wheelchair could go fast enough for racing and if he still liked the same foods as before his accident." "What did you tell her?" "That those were excellent questions to ask Ben directly." Marcus smiled. "One thing we've learned about Joy is that she's much better at figuring people out through conversation than through adult explanations." They watched as Joy demonstrated an elaborate ball-bouncing sequence that involved catching the ball behind her back, while Ben attempted to master the basic version of the same skill. His concentration was complete, his entire being focused on the simple goal of successful ball handling. "Mom, I think I'm getting stronger," Ben announced during a brief pause in their game. "My back doesn't hurt as much when I sit up straight." The observation hit Lena like a physical blow, partly because she realized he was right. His posture had been gradually improving over the past few days, his endurance for sitting upright increasing in small but measurable increments. Changes, so subtle that she might have missed them if he hadn't pointed them out. "That's wonderful, Mijo. Remember to mention that to Dr. Reynolds on Thursday." "I will. I'm going to show him how I can kneel, and how my legs feel more awake, and maybe he'll understand what Joy means about yet." As their park visit wound down, Joy carefully placed her precious red ball back in her small backpack, but not before handing it to Ben one final time. "This is for practicing," she said solemnly. "You can keep it until next time we play together, but you have to promise to practice the star pattern, because that's the hardest one, and it might take lots of tries." Ben accepted the ball with the reverence due a sacred object. "I promise. And Joy, thank you for helping my legs remember." "They were always remembering," Joy corrected gently. "They were just waiting for the right time to show you." As they prepared to leave, Marcus approached Lena with a business card. "My direct number," he said, "if you ever need to talk parent to parent about any of this." Sometimes it helps to have someone who understands that children can surprise us in ways that don't fit into neat categories. Driving home, Lena glanced in the rearview mirror at Ben, who was carefully examining Joy's red ball as if it might contain the secrets of the universe. His face held a peace she hadn't seen since before the accident, a contentment that seemed to radiate from deep within. Thursday's medical appointment loomed large in her mind, carrying the weight of potential validation or crushing disappointment. But tonight, watching Ben practice ball bounces from his wheelchair with renewed confidence and joy, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility that some healings begin in the heart before they manifest in the body. The red ball sat on their kitchen table like a talisman of hope, a tangible reminder that sometimes the most profound medicine comes in the form of friendship, faith, and a 6-year-old's unshakable belief in. Yet Dr. Reynolds' office hadn't changed in the 6 months since Ben's last visit. The same beige walls decorated with cheerful pediatric artwork, the same play area with toys designed to assess motor skills and cognitive development, the same underlying smell of antiseptic masked by artificial vanilla air freshener. But everything felt different to Lena as they waited in the familiar examination room. Ben sat on the examination table, Joy's red ball clutched in his hands like a worry stone. He'd insisted on bringing it, claiming it helped his hands remember how to be strong. The simple act of gripping and releasing the rubber surface had indeed seemed to improve his fine motor control over the past 2 days, though Lena wasn't sure if the improvement was physical or psychological. "So, Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Reynolds said as he entered the room, his expression politely skeptical as he reviewed Ben's chart, "you mentioned some unusual developments since our last visit." "Ben has been showing signs of returning motor function in his lower extremities," Lena said, falling automatically into the professional language that doctors preferred. "He's been able to support his weight while standing, and on Tuesday he maintained a kneeling position for over a minute." Dr. Reynolds looked up from the chart, his eyebrows raised. "I see. And you witnessed these events?" "Yes. Multiple times over the past week." "Ben," Dr. Reynolds addressed him directly, "can you tell me what you've been feeling in your legs?" Ben looked at his mother for encouragement before answering. "They feel more awake, like they were sleeping for a long time, but now they remember they're supposed to move. And when I try to stand up with help, I can feel the ground under my feet." Dr. Reynolds made notes in the chart. "Have you been experiencing any pain or unusual sensations?" "Not pain exactly, more like when your leg falls asleep and then gets tingly when it wakes up. But good tingly, not scary tingly." The examination that followed was thorough and methodical. Dr. Reynolds tested Ben's reflexes, performed sensation assessments with various instruments, and observed his attempts at voluntary movement. When he asked Ben to demonstrate his standing ability, Lena helped support him while the doctor observed from multiple angles. Ben stood for 45 seconds, his legs trembling with effort but unmistakably supporting his weight. More impressive was his ability to shift his weight from one foot to the other, a complex neurological function that should have been impossible with his level of spinal cord injury. "Interesting," Dr. Reynolds murmured, making extensive notes. "Ben, I'm going to order some new tests, an MRI to look at your spine again, and something called nerve conduction studies to see how well the signals are traveling from your brain to your legs. Will the tests show that my legs are getting better?" Ben asked hopefully. "They'll help us understand what's happening in your body. Sometimes the nervous system can surprise us, especially in young people. Your brain and spinal cord are still growing and developing, which means they have possibilities for healing that adults don't have." It was the first time Dr. Reynolds had acknowledged any possibility for recovery, and Lena felt a flutter of cautious optimism. "I do want to manage expectations here," Dr. Reynolds continued, his tone becoming more serious. What you're describing is highly unusual for this type of injury. Even if the tests show some improvement, it doesn't necessarily mean Ben will regain full function. But it means something is changing, Lena pressed. Yes, it means something is changing. The tests were scheduled for the following week, which left Lena in an uncomfortable limbo between hope and realism. She found herself observing Ben with new intensity, documenting every small sign of progress while trying not to read too much into normal childhood behavior. Rosa arrived for Sunday dinner carrying a large manila envelope and wearing the expression she reserved for moments of particular significance. "I brought something," she announced, settling at the kitchen table, while Lena prepared their meal. Pictures from when Ben was little. The envelope contained years of family photographs. Ben as a toddler taking his first steps, Ben at 3 years old running through sprinklers, Ben at 5 playing in his first soccer game. Images of a life before the accident, when movement was as natural as breathing. "Why are you showing me these, Mama?" Lena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Because that boy," Rosa pointed to a photo of Ben mid-run, his face bright with exertion and joy, "is still in there. The accident changed his body, but it didn't change who he is inside." Ben studied the photographs with fascination, as if viewing artifacts from someone else's life. "I remember this one," he said, pointing to a picture of himself hanging from monkey bars at a playground. "My arms were so tired afterward, but I felt really strong." "Your body remembers too, mijo," Rosa said, gently. "Sometimes memories live in our muscles and bones, waiting for the right moment to come back." That afternoon, Lena found herself looking at the photographs with new eyes. In every image, Ben radiated physical confidence, climbing, running, jumping, balancing on playground equipment with the fearless grace that marked natural athletes. That physicality hadn't disappeared overnight. It had been buried under months of medical limitations and protective caution. The phone rang Tuesday evening as Lena was helping Ben with his homework. Marcus Williams's voice carried a warmth that had become increasingly familiar over their brief acquaintance. "I hope you don't mind me calling," he said. "Joy has been asking about Ben non-stop since your park visit. She's convinced that he needs to practice his ball skills every day, and she's worried that he's not getting enough opportunities to work with his legs." Lena smiled despite her exhaustion. "She's probably right. His physical therapist has been focusing on wheelchair skills and upper body strength. We haven't done much with actual leg function because until last week there wasn't any to work with. Would you be interested in meeting us at the park again? Joy has some new ideas for games that might help Ben practice standing and balance." The invitation was exactly what Lena had been hoping for without quite realizing it. Ben's progress seemed directly connected to Joy's presence, and more importantly, his emotional state flourished in their friendship.